Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge, watching the stars fade from blue to white as the ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. After 18 months of sleep and dreams, he was finally awake to see their new home. The Kepler system spread out before them like a jewel box filled with planets and moons that could support human life. Lisa Park ran her fingers across the science station controls and smiled for the first time in months. The readings were even better than Earth's long-range telescopes had suggested. 3 planets showed signs of water and breathable atmosphere. 2 had continents that looked perfect for cities and farms. This was going to be humanity's greatest success story. Ryan Carter checked the security systems one more time before allowing Bud himself to feel excited. His job was to worry about threats, but the system looked empty of dangers. No military signals came from any of the planets. No weapons platforms hung in space, waiting to destroy them. Just clean worlds spinning quietly. Around their yellow sun, Dr. Sophie Williams finished her medical checks on the crew. Everyone had survived the long journey in perfect health. The new sleep technology had worked better than anyone hoped. 300 humans were ready to start building a new civilization among the stars. She felt proud to be part of something so important. Jake activated the communication system to wake the rest of the crew. His voice carried through every deck of the ship as people began to stir from their long sleep. They had made it. They were the first humans to travel this far from Earth, and they had found exactly what they were looking for. The celebration lasted exactly 47 minutes. Lisa's instruments detected the ship's first 12 vessels appeared on the edge of the system, moving toward them with purpose and speed. The ships were unlike anything in human databases. They were smooth and silver with no visible weapons, but their approach pattern showed military training. Ryan brought the ship to alert status without being asked. Something about the alien ships made his instincts scream warnings. They moved too perfectly in formation. Their course changes were too precise. These were not explorers or traders. These were soldiers. The communication came in perfect English, which surprised everyone. The alien voice was cold and mechanical, like a computer trying to sound alive. It identified itself as High Coordinator Zeth9 of the Vectari Empire. The aliens claimed ownership of the entire Kepler system and demanded that the humans explain their presence. Jake responded with careful diplomatic language. He explained that humans had traveled far to find a new home and hoped to share the system peacefully. There were many worlds here, and surely room for both species to live without conflict. He offered friendship and trade agreements that could benefit everyone. The aliens' response chilled the bridge crew. Zeth9 explained that the Vectari had claimed this system 300 years ago. All planets and moons belonged to their empire by right of discovery and development. Humans were welcome to remain, but only as workers in designated zones under Vectari supervision. Lisa studied the alien ships more carefully and found disturbing details. The vessels were clearly designed for war, despite having no visible weapons. Their hulls were thick enough to stop most human weapons. Their engines were powerful enough to chase down anything the humans might build. The technology gap was significant. Ryan counted 12 ships against their 1 exploration vessel. Even if the Horizon's Edge had been a warship, the odds would be impossible. But they were not warriors. They were colonists with farming equipment and construction tools. They had some small weapons for protection against wild animals, but nothing that could threaten military spacecraft. Dr. Sophie Williams watched the crew's faces as the reality of their situation became clear. The excitement of reaching their new home was fading into worry and fear. These people had left everything behind on Earth to build a better future. Now that future was being taken away by aliens who saw them as nothing more than free labor. Jake tried to negotiate, but the aliens showed no interest in compromise. Zeth9 explained that the Vectari were a logical species who made decisions based on efficiency and order. Emotions were weaknesses that led to poor choices. Humans would be much happier once they learned to control their feelings and accept their proper place in Vectari society. The alien ships moved closer with each exchange. Soon they would be in range to board the human vessel or destroy it completely. Jake realized that peaceful solutions might be impossible, but he continued talking while his crew prepared for whatever might come next. Lisa began recording everything about the alien ships and their technology. Ryan quietly checked their small weapons and emergency systems. Dr. Sophie Williams prepared medical supplies for potential injuries. Everyone worked with calm efficiency while their commander bought them time with careful words. The first meeting between humans and aliens was not going the way anyone had hoped. The Vectari seemed to view emotions as mental illness and humans as primitive creatures who needed guidance. They offered slavery disguised as protection and called it kindness. Jake Morrison looked at his crew and saw the same determination in every face. These people had not traveled across the galaxy to become servants to cold alien masters. They would find another way even if the Vectari could not see it yet. 3 weeks passed in careful negotiations that felt more like slow torture. The Vectari ships maintained their position around the horizon's edge while diplomatic talks continued every day. High Coordinator Zethnine seemed genuinely confused by human resistance to what he called reasonable terms. Jake Morrison found himself explaining basic human concepts that the aliens could not understand. The idea that people needed freedom to be happy made no sense to them. The concept that forcing someone to work against their will was wrong seemed completely foreign. Every day brought new evidence that humans and Vectari thought in totally different ways. Lisa Park used the time to study everything she could about their alien visitors. The Vectari had evolved on a world where cooperation meant survival and individual thinking led to death. Their entire society was built around following orders and maintaining perfect efficiency. They genuinely believed they were offering humans a better life by removing the burden of making choices. Ryan Carter watched the alien patrol patterns and noted their weaknesses. The Vectari were predictable because they followed logical routines. They never changed their schedules or varied their methods. Their strength was also their weakness because they could not adapt quickly to unexpected situations. Dr. Sophie Williams studied psychological profiles of the crew and grew worried about what she saw. The stress of being trapped was affecting everyone. People were having trouble sleeping and some were showing signs of depression. The uncertainty about their future was eating away at morale day by day. The breaking point came when Jake received permission to send a small survey team to one of the system's moons. The Vectari agreed that humans could explore neutral areas, as long as they stayed away from established alien installations. It seemed like a small victory that might lead to better agreements. Lieutenant Ben Hayes volunteered to lead the survey mission, along with geologists Amy Foster and engineer Carlos Rivera. They took a small shuttle down to the moon's surface to look for mineral deposits and possible settlement sites. Everyone expected them to return in a few hours with good news about their potential new home. The survey team found exactly what they were looking for. The moon had rich metal deposits and underground water sources. The gravity was comfortable and the atmosphere could be made breathable with simple technology. Amy Foster took soil samples while Carlos Rivera mapped cave systems that could be turned into underground cities. Ben Hayes established a communication link with the main ship and reported their discoveries. Everything was going perfectly according to plan. The moon could support thousands of people and provide resources for building a real civilization. For the first time since arriving in the system, the humans had something to celebrate. The Vectari patrol ship appeared without warning. Sub-Coordinator Krell 7 commanded the vessel and had decided that the humans were violating territorial boundaries. The survey team tried to explain that they had permission to be there, but the alien officer was not interested in listening to explanations. Krell 7 had received orders to demonstrate Vectari authority over inferior species. The timing seemed perfect, because he could teach the humans an important lesson about following rules. He ordered his soldiers to capture the survey team for what he called corrective procedures. Amy Foster was the first to be taken. The Vectari soldiers used some kind of stunning weapon that left her conscious but unable to move. They carried her into their ship while she watched helplessly. Carlos Rivera tried to run, but the aliens caught him easily with the same weapon. Ben Hayes managed to send one final message to the horizon's edge before the aliens captured him. His transmission was cut off in the middle of a sentence, but everyone heard the fear in his voice. Something terrible was happening to the survey team, and there was nothing anyone could do to help them. Jake Morrison demanded immediate communication with High Coordinator Zethnine. When the alien leader appeared on screen, he showed no concern about what had happened. He explained that the survey team had violated proper procedures and needed to be educated about acceptable behavior. The Vectari leader described the corrective procedures in clinical terms that made everyone's blood run cold. The aliens would use advanced technology to modify human brain patterns and remove what they called aggressive tendencies. The process would make the survey team more cooperative and easier to manage. Jake tried to explain that what the aliens were describing was torture and brainwashing. He demanded the immediate return of his people and threatened to report the incident to other human colonies. Zethnine listened with what seemed like genuine confusion about why anyone would object to such helpful treatment. Lisa Park ran calculations on her computers and discovered something horrifying. The Vectari corrective procedures were designed to permanently change human personality and memory. The survey team would not be the same people when they came back. Their minds would be altered in ways that could never be undone. Ryan Carter wanted to launch an immediate rescue mission, but the alien ships outnumbered and outgunned them completely. Any attack would result in the destruction of the Horizon's Edge and the death of everyone aboard. They could only wait and hope that somehow their friends would survive. Dr. Sophie Williams monitored the psychological state of the crew as news of the capture spread through the ship. People were angry and frightened and desperate to help their captured friends. She had never seen such intense emotions in a group that was supposed to remain calm and rational. The aliens had made a critical mistake, but they did not realize it. Yet, they thought fear would make humans more cooperative and obedient. They believed that demonstrating superior power would convince people to accept Vectari rule. They were completely wrong about how humans respond to threats against their families and friends. Something dark and dangerous was building in the hearts of every person aboard the Horizon's Edge. The Vectari had just learned that humans form emotional bonds that cannot be broken by logic or force. They had attacked innocent people who were simply trying to build a better life for their families. The aliens thought they were teaching humans about power and authority. Instead, they were about to learn something much more important about human nature. 5 days passed before the Vectari returned the survey team to the Horizon's Edge. 5 days of waiting and wondering what horrible things were being done to Ben, Hayes, and his crew. 5 days of growing anger that built like pressure in a sealed container waiting to explode. Jake Morrison stood in the shuttle bay watching the alien transport ship dock with his vessel. The Vectari had agreed to return the humans after completing their corrective procedures. They seemed proud of their work and expected gratitude for improving defective human minds. The shuttle bay doors opened and 3 figures stumbled out, supported by alien guards. At first, Jake did not recognize them as his missing crew members. They moved like broken dolls with empty eyes and uncertain steps. Their faces showed no emotion and no recognition of familiar surroundings. Amy Foster had been a brilliant geologist who could identify rock formations with a single glance. Now she stood staring at the shuttle bay walls as if she had never seen metal before. When Jake spoke her name, she turned toward him with confusion and fear, like a frightened animal hearing strange sounds. Carlos Rivera had been an engineer who could fix anything and solve any technical problem. Now he flinched at every noise and shadow as if expecting attack from invisible enemies. His hands shook constantly and he kept looking around for threats that existed only in his damaged mind. Ben Hayes had been a natural leader who never showed fear in dangerous situations. Now he could barely speak above a whisper and seemed unable to remember his own name. When Dr. Sophie Williams tried to examine him, he collapsed and began crying like a lost child. The alien guards explained the procedures in proud technical terms. They had identified and corrected aggressive behavior patterns in all 3 humans. The subjects would no longer resist authority or question orders from superior species. The modifications were permanent and would prevent future disciplinary problems. Dr. Sophie Williams ran every medical scan available while fighting back tears of rage and sorrow. The alien technology had systematically destroyed specific areas of human brain function. Memory centers had been scrambled. Personality cores had been erased. The 3 people she was examining were hollow shells of their former selves. Lisa Park documented every detail of the alien procedures using the medical data. She wanted evidence of what the Vectari were capable of doing to human minds. The technology was sophisticated and precise, but used for purposes that were purely evil. The aliens had turned healing science into a weapon for destroying souls. Ryan Carter watched his friends struggle to remember basic facts about their own lives. These were people he had trained with and shared meals with for months during the journey. Now they looked at him like strangers and seemed afraid of everything around them. His hands clenched into fists as anger built inside his chest. The final insult came when High Coordinator Zeth9 contacted the ship to check on the results of the corrective procedures. The alien leader seemed genuinely pleased with his work and expected praise for solving the discipline problem so efficiently. He offered to provide similar services for any other humans who showed signs of emotional instability. Jake Morrison listened to the alien's words with growing fury that he carefully kept hidden behind a calm expression. Zeth9 described the brain modifications as educational tools that would help humans adapt to civilized society. He compared the procedures to training animals and seemed confused when Jake did not express gratitude. The alien leader explained that emotions were mental defects that prevented logical thinking. Fear and anger and sadness were diseases that needed to be cured for the good of everyone. The Vectari had done humans a favor by removing these harmful feelings from the survey team. They would be much happier now that they could think clearly. Jake asked careful questions about the procedures while recording every word of the aliens' explanations. He wanted to understand exactly what had been done to his people and whether the damage could be reversed. The answers were not encouraging. The Vectari technology was designed to make permanent changes that could not be undone. Dr. Sophie Williams worked frantically to help the 3 damaged humans, but her efforts showed little progress. Their minds had been torn apart by alien science and put back together wrong. They remembered fragments of their old lives, but could not connect the pieces into complete pictures. Their personalities had been replaced with artificial patterns, designed to ensure obedience. The crew of the Horizons Edge watched their friends struggle with simple tasks that had once been easy. Amy Foster could no longer identify common minerals. Carlos Rivera was afraid to touch any mechanical equipment. Ben Hayes could not remember the names of people he had known for years. Lisa Park ran computer simulations to understand how the alien procedures worked. The Vectari had identified brain centers responsible for independence and creativity and systematically destroyed them. They had also implanted artificial fear responses that would prevent resistance to authority. The whole process was designed to create perfect slaves. Ryan Carter found himself imagining what he would do to the aliens if he ever got the chance. The thoughts were dark and violent and completely unlike his normal personality. He had always been a peaceful person who used force only when necessary. Now he wanted to hurt the creatures who had damaged his friends. Jake Morrison realized that peaceful negotiation was no longer possible. The Vectari had demonstrated their true nature by torturing innocent people for the crime of exploring an empty moon. They saw humans as animals to be trained rather than people to be respected. Any agreement with such creatures would be meaningless. The commander made a decision that would change everything. He thanked High Coordinator Zephnine for the demonstration and requested time to consider the Vectari offer of expanded corrective services. The alien leader was pleased by what he saw as human acceptance of superior authority. He granted the request and promised to wait for a response. Jake Morrison turned off the communication system and looked at his crew. Something had changed in their faces during the past 5 days. The fear was still there, but it was being replaced by something much more dangerous. These people had seen their friends tortured and their minds destroyed by creatures who called it kindness. Dr. Sophie Williams documented the extent of damage done to the survey team and shared her findings with the senior staff. The modifications were extensive and probably permanent. The 3 humans would never fully recover their original personalities or abilities. They had been killed in every way that mattered except the physical. The alien ships continued their patrol patterns around the human vessel while Zephnine waited for an answer to his generous offer. The Vectari leader was confident that humans would accept their place in the natural order once they understood the consequences of resistance. Logic and superior technology always triumphed over emotion and primitive thinking. But the aliens had made a fundamental error in their understanding of human nature. They thought fear would create submission. Instead, they had created something far more dangerous than they could imagine. Jake Morrison called a private meeting in the deepest part of the ship where alien sensors could not detect their activities. The senior staff gathered in a storage room surrounded by boxes of supplies and construction equipment. The lighting was dim and the air was thick with tension that had been building for days. He looked at each person in turn before speaking the words that would change everything. His voice was quiet but filled with an intensity that made everyone lean forward to listen. He told them that the time for negotiation and diplomacy had ended. The Vectari had shown their true nature, and it was evil beyond redemption. Ryan Carter nodded with grim satisfaction as the commander spoke. He had been waiting for this moment since watching his friends return as broken shells of their former selves. The security chief had already been thinking about ways to turn their peaceful exploration ship into something much more dangerous. Lisa Park pulled out her portable computer and began showing technical diagrams of the alien ships. She had been studying their weaknesses during the long days of waiting. The Vectari vessels were powerful, but they followed predictable patterns. Their strength came from superior technology, but their weakness was an inability to think outside logical parameters. Dr. Sophie Williams surprised everyone by volunteering to help with whatever plans they might make. The gentle doctor had seen enough suffering to understand that sometimes violence was the only way to stop greater violence. The aliens had tortured innocent people and called it healing. They needed to be stopped before they could hurt anyone else. Jake explained his strategy using simple words that carried the weight of absolute determination. They would not try to fight the aliens in direct combat because that would be suicide. Instead, they would use human creativity and unpredictability to create chaos in the ordered Vectari world. They would teach the aliens about consequences. The transformation began immediately as every crew member found ways to contribute to the war effort. The ship's industrial fabricators were reprogrammed to produce improvised weapons and explosive devices. Medical supplies were converted into chemical weapons that could disable alien life support systems. Ryan Carter took apart every piece of unnecessary equipment to create kinetic projectiles and electromagnetic pulse devices. The exercise machines became parts for catapults. The food processors were turned into bomb casings. Even the recreational holographic systems were converted into decoy projectors that could confuse alien sensors. Lisa Park used her scientific knowledge to develop new ways of attacking enemy technology. She discovered that Vectari computer systems were vulnerable to certain electromagnetic frequencies. She also found ways to disrupt their communication networks using modified human equipment. Every alien advantage could be turned into a weakness with enough creativity. Dr. Sophie Williams applied her medical expertise to developing psychological warfare techniques. She studied the alien behavior patterns and identified mental vulnerabilities that could be exploited. The Vectari pride in logical thinking could be turned against them by creating situations that defied rational explanation. The crew worked with focused intensity that amazed everyone involved. People who had never touched weapons before became experts at building explosive devices. Scientists learned to think like soldiers while maintaining their analytical skills. The combination of human emotion and intelligence created something the aliens had never encountered. Jake established communication with other human colonies using quantum relay systems that the Vectari could not intercept. He shared everything they had learned about alien technology and tactics. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every human settlement within range began preparing for what everyone knew was coming. The other colonies sent technical specifications for weapons and defensive systems. They shared intelligence about alien behavior gathered from long-range observations. Most importantly, they sent messages of support that strengthened the resolve of everyone aboard the Horizon's Edge. Humanity would stand together against the alien threat. Lisa Park worked with engineers from 12 different star systems to develop new technologies specifically designed to counter Vectari advantages. The collaborative effort produced innovations that neither group could have achieved alone. Human creativity multiplied when focused on a common goal. Ryan Carter trained volunteers in combat techniques using improvised weapons and guerrilla tactics. The crew learned to fight in ways that the aliens would not expect or understand. They practiced moving silently through the ship's corridors and setting traps in seemingly innocent locations. Dr. Sophie Williams developed detailed psychological profiles of their alien captors. Based on recorded conversations and observed behaviors, she identified specific fears and anxieties that could be used to destabilize Vectari mental states. The aliens' greatest strength was their logical thinking, but that also made them vulnerable to psychological manipulation. The planning sessions continued around the clock as people worked with desperate energy to prepare for the coming conflict. Everyone understood that failure would mean death or worse for the entire human species. The Vectari had demonstrated what they did to people who resisted their authority. Jake Morrison coordinated the massive effort while maintaining normal ship operations to avoid alerting the alien monitors. The Vectari ships continued their patrol patterns while scanning for signs of human activity. They detected increased power usage and communication traffic, but attributed it to normal stress responses. High Coordinator Zethnine remained confident that humans would eventually accept Vectari authority once they understood the futility of resistance. The alien leader was pleased by what he interpreted as human acceptance of their situation. He expected a message of surrender within a few more days. The Vectari monitoring systems detected the increased activity aboard the human ship, but classified it as inefficient emotional responses to stress. The aliens saw no actual threat from a species that relied on feelings rather than logic for decision-making. Their technological superiority made human resistance impossible, but something was building in the depths of the Horizon's Edge that defied every assumption the aliens had made about human nature. The crew had discovered that rage and determination combined with intelligence and creativity could overcome any technological advantage. They were about to teach the Vectari a lesson about the consequences of underestimating human resolve. Jake Morrison stood before his transformed crew and saw something that would have terrified the aliens if they had understood what it meant. These people had moved beyond fear and anger into something much more dangerous. They had become human beings with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The time for hiding and planning was almost over. Soon the aliens would learn what happened when they pushed humanity too far. The attack began at exactly 3:47 in the morning ship time with a message broadcast across every Vectari communication frequency. Jake Morrison's voice was calm and steady as he spoke words that would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. He told the aliens that they had hurt human people and now they would learn what that meant. The first phase of the human assault was unlike anything the Vectari had expected or prepared for. Instead of attacking their ships directly, the humans began a campaign of psychological warfare that targeted something the aliens had never thought to protect. Their minds were about to experience something completely foreign to their species. Ryan Carter led the first strike team through space using modified construction suits that the alien sensors could not detect. They approached the nearest patrol ship and attached devices that would change everything. The aliens inside had no idea that their ordered world was about to become a nightmare of inexplicable events. The devices activated simultaneously across the alien fleet, creating malfunctions that followed no logical pattern. Equipment would work perfectly for hours and then stop functioning for no apparent reason. Computer systems would display information that made no sense according to any known scientific principles. Navigation instruments would point in directions that did not exist. Lisa Parker designed the chaos generators using her deep understanding of Vectari psychology and technology. The aliens depended on logical explanations for everything in their environment. When faced with events that could not be explained, their minds began to experience something they had never felt before: fear. The second phase began when Dr. Sophie Williams activated her broadcasting equipment and filled the alien communication networks with human music and poetry and art. The emotional content hit the Vectari like a physical blow because their brains had no capacity for processing such information. Love songs became weapons more devastating than any explosive device. The aliens tried to filter out the human transmissions, but the emotional content had already infected their systems. Vectari crew members began experiencing feelings they had no words to describe. Some began crying without understanding why. Others felt overwhelming sadness or inexplicable joy that disrupted their ability to perform basic functions. High Coordinator Zeth9 demanded explanations from his subordinates, but no one could provide logical answers for what was happening. The alien leader's perfect world of order and efficiency was collapsing into chaos that followed no pattern he could understand. For the first time in his life, he felt something approaching panic. Ryan Carter's teams continued their invisible assault on alien installations throughout the system. They left evidence of human presence everywhere, but never in ways the Vectari could predict or prevent. Tools would be rearranged in impossible patterns. Personnel would disappear for hours and return with no memory of where they had been. The psychological impact was devastating because the aliens had built their entire civilization around the concept that everything could be explained through logic and science. When faced with events that defied rational explanation, their minds began to break down in ways their species had never experienced. Lisa Park monitored the alien communication networks and watched their society tear itself apart from within. Vectari commanders were reporting impossible events to their superiors, who demanded logical explanations that no one could provide. The chain of command was collapsing as fear spread through their ranks like a plague. Dr. Sophie Williams refined her emotional broadcasts based on the alien responses she observed. She learned which types of human art created the most severe psychological disruption in Vectari minds. Classical music seemed to cause physical pain, while romantic poetry created existential crisis that left aliens unable to function. The third phase involved the systematic rescue of other human prisoners that the aliens had captured and modified. The teams moved through Vectari facilities like ghosts, leaving destruction in their wake. They freed dozens of people who had been subjected to corrective procedures and gathered evidence of alien atrocities. Jake Morrison coordinated the complex operation while maintaining constant communication with human colonies throughout the galaxy. The evidence of Vectari crimes was being broadcast to every corner of human space. The message was clear and terrifying. This was what happened to humans under alien rule, and this was why the Vectari had to be stopped. The alien response was predictably logical and completely ineffective. They increased security patrols and implemented new communication protocols, but their efforts were useless against an enemy that did not follow rational patterns. The humans attacked psychological vulnerabilities that the Vectari did not know they possessed. High Coordinator Zeth9 attempted to negotiate with Jake Morrison but found himself dealing with a human leader who was no longer interested in diplomatic solutions. The aliens' offers of compromise and concession were met with cold rejection. The time for peaceful resolution had ended when the Vectari decided to torture innocent people. The final phase began when Dr. Sophie Williams released her most devastating weapon into the alien population. Using her medical knowledge and the data gathered from tortured human prisoners, she had developed biological agents that triggered emotional responses in Vectari physiology. The aliens began experiencing fear and anger and despair for the first time in their evolutionary history. The effect was catastrophic because the Vectari had no mental framework for dealing with emotions. Their logical minds simply could not process feelings that had no rational basis. Some aliens went insane from the experience. Others became catatonic as their brains shut down to protect themselves from sensory overload. Ryan Carter led the final assault teams against the alien command centers while their defenders were incapacitated by emotional shock. The humans moved through Vectari installations like avenging angels, bringing justice to creatures who had shown no mercy. They were no longer the frightened colonists who had arrived in the system. Months earlier, Lisa Park documented every moment of the alien collapse for transmission to human colonies. The galaxy needed to see what happened when a species underestimated human determination and resolve. The Vectari had dismissed emotions as weaknesses, but learned to late that feelings could be channeled into unstoppable force. High Coordinator Zeth9 found himself trapped in a command center surrounded by subordinates who could no longer function effectively. The perfect order of Vectari society had been replaced by chaos that his logical mind could not comprehend. He tried to surrender, but Jake Morrison was no longer accepting alien communications. The humans had taught the Vectari a lesson about consequences that would be remembered throughout the galaxy. A species that valued logic above all else had been defeated by creatures who embraced their emotional nature and used it as a weapon. The age of Vectari dominance was ending in confusion and terror that their minds could not process. The attack continued with relentless efficiency as human creativity and alien psychology combined to create the perfect storm of destruction. The Vectari had wanted to demonstrate their superiority over an inferior species. Instead, they learned that there was nothing inferior about human rage when it was properly focused and directed. 6 months after the conflict began, the Vectari civilization lay in ruins throughout the Kepler system, not destroyed by superior weapons or advanced technology, but systematically dismantled by a species they had dismissed as primitive and emotional. The humans had proven that raw feeling channeled through intelligence could overcome any technological advantage. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge, which had become the flagship of a growing human fleet. Ships from 12 different colonies had arrived to support the liberation effort and establish permanent human presence in the system. The commander who had started as a peaceful explorer was now Admiral Morrison, leading humanity's first interstellar military force. The rescued prisoners had recovered enough to return to active duty, though they would always carry scars from their experience with alien torture. Ben Hayes now commanded a specialized unit dedicated to preventing future atrocities against human prisoners. His team had become experts at psychological warfare and rescue operations in hostile territory. Amy Foster had regained most of her geological expertise and was leading surveys of planets throughout the system. The trauma of alien mind modification had left her with gaps in memory, but her determination to build a human civilization had only grown stronger. She worked with quiet intensity that inspired everyone around her. Carlos Rivera had overcome his fear of technology and was designing defensive systems for the new human settlements. His engineering skills had returned along with a deep understanding of how aliens thought and operated. The modifications to his mind had been partially reversed, but the experience had changed him in fundamental ways. Dr. Sophie Williams published her research on the psychological effects of the conflict in journals that were read throughout human space. Her work demonstrated that humans possessed unique abilities among known species. They could transform trauma into strength and channel grief into determination that other races found impossible to understand. Lisa Park had been promoted to chief science officer for the entire human fleet and was working with researchers from dozens of colonies. Her innovations in psychological warfare had opened new fields of study that combined human creativity with alien psychology. The techniques developed during the Vectari conflict were being adapted for use against other potential threats. Ryan Carter trained the security forces for all human settlements in the system using lessons learned from fighting an enemy with superior technology. His methods emphasized adaptability and creative thinking over traditional military tactics. The humans had learned to fight wars in ways that logical species could not predict or counter. The Vectari survivors were few and scattered throughout the galaxy. Most had suffered permanent psychological damage from exposure to human emotions that their brains could not process. Some had gone completely insane, while others had become obsessed with understanding the species that had defeated them so thoroughly. That High Coordinator Zeth9 existed as a broken reminder of what happened when logical species encountered human determination. His recorded testimony had become legendary throughout the galaxy as a warning to other aliens who might consider threatening humanity. The former leader spoke in fragmented sentences about the terror of feeling emotions for the first time. The alien's final statement had been broadcast to every known civilization in the galaxy. He described humans as the most dangerous species he had ever encountered because they could transform weakness into strength and use emotions as weapons. His warning would influence alien policy toward humans for generations to come. The Kepler system had become humanity's first major extraterrestrial stronghold and a symbol of what humans could accomplish when pushed beyond their limits. The planets were being terraformed and settled by colonists from Earth and other human worlds. Cities were rising where alien installations had once stood. Other alien civilizations throughout the galaxy had taken notice of the human victory over the mighty Vectari Empire. Some offered friendship and trade agreements based on mutual respect rather than assumed superiority. Others maintained careful distance, having learned from the Vectari mistake about underestimating human capabilities. Jake Morrison established the first human doctrine for interstellar relations based on the lessons learned from the conflict. Humanity would seek peaceful cooperation whenever possible, but would respond with overwhelming force to any threat against human civilians. The galaxy had been warned about the consequences of harming innocent people. The doctrine stated clearly that humans came in peace, seeking friendship and mutual benefit, but would not tolerate aggression or cruelty from any source. Species that chose to test human resolve would discover that the universe had never seen anything like human rage unleashed with purpose and direction. Dr. Sophie Williams' research had revealed the key to human success in interstellar conflicts. Other species saw emotions as weaknesses that interfered with logical thinking. Humans had learned to use feelings as sources of strength that could overcome any obstacle when properly channeled toward righteous goals. The Vectari had made the fatal error of believing that superior technology automatically meant superior capability. They had failed to understand that human creativity increased exponentially when combined with emotional motivation. Logic alone could not compete with the combination of intelligence and passionate determination. Lisa Park documented the complete collapse of Vectari civilization for future study by human xenologists and military strategists. The aliens had been defeated not by matching their technology but by attacking psychological vulnerabilities they did not know existed. The victory had established new principles for fighting technologically superior enemies. The human colonies throughout the galaxy celebrated the victory while preparing for future challenges. The success against the Vectari had proven that humanity could defend itself against any threat, but had also marked humans as a species that other aliens would watch carefully. The galaxy had learned that emotions could be weapons when wielded by determined minds. Ben Hayes worked with other survivors of alien torture to establish support networks for future victims. Their experience had taught them that the human spirit could survive almost any assault if given proper care and time to heal. The psychological scars would always remain, but could be transformed into sources of strength. The Kepler system stood as a monument to human determination and a warning to any species that might consider threatening innocent people. The planets orbited their star peacefully while human cities grew and prospered under the protection of defensive systems designed by people who had learned the true cost of freedom. Jake Morrison looked out at the stars and knew that humanity had passed its first test as an interstellar civilization. They had encountered a species that wanted to enslave them and had responded with the full fury of human determination. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about the consequences of underestimating human rage when it was focused on protecting the innocent and defending justice.